Max Verstappen sat in his car after the Spanish Grand Prix, silent and frustrated. A 49-point deficit hung over him like a storm cloud. The team radio? Completely still. No cheers, no plans for what's next. That's because back at Red Bull's factory, the decision had already been made. No more upgrades for the RB21. As McLaren surges ahead and Ferrari continues its climb, Red Bull's defense of its title is crumbling, and they aren't even trying to fight it. So, why is Verstappen, at the peak of his career, being left out in the cold? Has Red Bull already given up on 2025? Maybe even on Max himself? Because when dynasties fall in Formula One, it's rarely just one bad race or a single regulation change. It's a slow, creeping unraveling. And the signs? They're everywhere. In a move that shocked even insiders, Red Bull made a decision that's raised eyebrows across the paddock. They've stopped major upgrades for the RB21 with half the season still to run. Verstappen, who's at the height of his powers, is now tasked with dragging around a car that's no longer evolving. Meanwhile, his rivals, McLaren, Ferrari, keep firing on all cylinders, pushing out upgrades race after race. Max, once the dominant force, is no longer fighting for a title. And the RB21? It's done. No more major upgrades. Whispers in the paddock suggest that Red Bull has shifted its full focus to 2026. Yes, you read that right, 2026. And with it, the cracks that Red Bull once ignored are starting to widen, and they're no longer able to keep up the illusion of invincibility. Look at the numbers. After the Spanish Grand Prix, Max Verstappen is trailing Oscar Piastri by a staggering 49 points in the championship. 49 points! That's not just a gap. That's a canyon. Max hasn't found himself this far behind in years. And the mood in the garage? It's telling. The reigning champion isn't thinking about comebacks anymore. He's already looking to next year. In the post-race interviews, his tone was flat, almost defeated. When asked about the championship, he simply shrugged and said, "It's over. We're too far behind." That's not the Max we know, not the Max who dominated with ruthless precision. But it's not just him. The entire Red Bull team has lost the spark it once wielded as a weapon. No big upgrades, no radical innovations, no urgency. Red Bull has essentially thrown in the towel on 2025. Sure, there'll be minor updates, tweaks here and there, but nothing that's going to close the gap to McLaren. Internally, sources confirm that Red Bull has already shifted all its resources to developing the RB22, the car designed for 2026 under the new engine regulations and aero philosophy. This is typical in F1, where teams realize they're out of the fight and refocus on the future. But what's jarring here is how early they pulled the plug. It's June. There's still half a season to go. So why the early surrender? The answer might lie in what Red Bull isn't saying. The so-called flexi-wing saga, which was supposed to give them an edge, barely made a dent. Red Bull expected McLaren and Ferrari to struggle with the FIA's new stiffness tests, but instead, both teams adapted swiftly, while Red Bull's performance actually took a hit. What was supposed to level the playing field has done nothing but expose the limits of Red Bull's current car. And that's what it all comes down to. It's not just about lap times, it's about direction. The RB21's floor concept, the very foundation of its aerodynamic design, is reportedly maxed out. Engineers are struggling to extract more downforce without making the rear unstable. What worked brilliantly in 2022 and 2023 now feels like a weight holding them back. As the rest of the grid catches up, and in some cases moves ahead, Red Bull's concept has hit a ceiling. While Verstappen hasn't spoken out dramatically on the radio or in interviews, his body language and demeanor tell a different story. The short responses in interviews, the long serious discussions with engineers post-race, these aren't the actions of a driver in control of a championship fight. These are the actions of someone who knows the battle might already be over, and more worryingly, that his team isn't planning a rescue mission. And there's something even more unsettling for Red Bull, the psychological shift. For the first time in years, McLaren and Ferrari aren't just chasing Red Bull. They're attacking with confidence. In high-degradation races like Miami and Barcelona, Red Bull didn't just lose out-strategized, they were outpaced. And that's the kind of blow that eats away at morale. Behind the scenes, Christian Horner insists the team is thinking long-term. But there's mounting speculation that this isn't just about next year. It's about holding on to Verstappen himself. Because if Max continues to feel abandoned, that contract running through 2028 starts to look less solid, especially when murmurs of Mercedes and even Aston Martin sniffing around begin to grow louder. Helmut Marko, the team's longtime advisor and Verstappen confidant, has reportedly clashed with senior figures about the team's strategic shift. According to German outlet Automotive Unport, Marko believes that Red Bull are retreating too soon. He wanted an aggressive push through the summer to reclaim momentum, but the rest of the leadership team sees the writing on the wall. The internal power struggle isn't new. Ever since the Christian Her controversy earlier this year, there's been tension in the upper ranks. Some believe the scandal weakened her grip. Others argue that his resolve has only hardened. What's clear is that the Red Bull of 2025 is no longer the unified juggernaut it was. And for Verstappen, he's watching all of this closely. While he's never been one for politics, he understands leverage. If Red Bull can't give him a winning car, he'll look elsewhere. Rumors of performance clauses in his contract have surfaced again, clauses that could allow him to walk if the team fails to meet certain benchmarks. Meanwhile, the second Red Bull seat remains a revolving door. Yuki Tsunoda's form has been erratic at best, and with 2026 looming, the team has been linked to a half-dozen names. Isaac Hadjar, Felipe Dugovic, even Valtteri Bottas, but none of them inspire confidence, and none are close to Verstappen's level. This uncertainty bleeds into everything. Without a strong number two, Red Bull can't execute two-car strategies. They can't pressure rivals into mistakes, and they can't rely on backup points when Max has a bad weekend, which for the first time in years is starting to happen more frequently. And what happens if Verstappen misses a race? There's growing chatter about a potential race ban stemming from the Russell incident in Barcelona. If that happens, Red Bull would have to call up either Isaac Hadjar or Arvid Lindblad. Both are talented. Hadjar is reportedly the favorite, but throwing him into a race weekend with minimal prep would be risky at best. Then there's the cost cap controversy. Flavio Briatore, now back in the F1 political scene, slammed the current structure in a fiery interview last week. He pointed out that top driver salaries like Verstappen are exempt from the cap, giving wealthier teams an unfair advantage. You can spend $50 million on a driver and nothing on upgrades. That's not a budget cap. That's a joke, he said. While Breeder's comments weren't aimed solely at Red Bull, they highlight a growing tension within the sport. And Red Bull, once the disruptors, now find themselves defending the status quo. The combination of performance decline, internal friction, and strategic withdrawal paints a grim picture. Red Bull are not just losing races, they're losing control of the narrative. They're no longer feared, they're questioned. And in Formula One, perception is power. So where does this leave the team, stuck in no man's land? Too far behind to catch up, too proud to admit defeat, and too focused on 2026 to fight for what's left of 2025. It's a holding pattern, a strategic pause. But the risk is that by the time they're ready to fight again, the world around them has moved on. And maybe that's already happening. McLaren's rise has been surgical. Ferrari, while inconsistent, have closed the gap. Mercedes, despite their struggles, are investing heavily into next year's concept. Even Aston Martin, armed with Honda power, and Adrian Newey from 2026, are preparing their move. The grid is compressing. Red Bull's window of dominance is closing. So, what do you think? Is Red Bull making the right call by abandoning 2025 to focus on the future? Or are they letting go of the one thing that made them unbeatable, Max Verstappen's faith? Let us know in the comments, and make sure to watch the next video on your screen. The cracks are showing, and this story is only getting started.